The crowd was already screaming before the first drop of blood touched the sand. Tens of thousands of voices rose together, a living wall of sound that shook the stone ribs of the Colosseum. From the highest tier to the shadowed arches below, Rome leaned forward as one body, hungry and impatient. To them, this was celebration. To the men waiting beneath the arena floor, it was the last morning of their lives. No one told them they were about to become a secret. The prisoners stood in darkness, chained wrist to wrist, the smell of rust and old sweat clinging to their skin. Some were soldiers captured on distant frontiers, others rebels, thieves, or men condemned for crimes real or invented. A few were barely old enough to grow beards. Rome did not care who they had been. In the arena, they were all the same thing, fuel. They had been marched through the city at dawn, past temples and fountains, past citizens buying bread and flowers. Children had laughed and pointed. Women had looked away. This was normal. Rome's greatness rested on rituals like this, on the understanding that power must be seen to be believed. But what happened after the gates closed, after the sunlight hit the sand, was something Rome preferred not to explain too clearly. Above them, the games had begun. Trumpets blared, and the prisoners felt it in their bones. The sound echoed down the tunnels like a call from the underworld. Guards shoved them forward, down a corridor slick with old blood. Somewhere ahead, iron gates creaked open. The smell of animals drifted in, sharp and wild, mixed with the copper scent of death that never quite left this place. They had been told they would face gladiators. That was the lie that made it easier. To fight a man, even a trained one, sounded almost honorable. But Rome's darkest secret was this: most prisoners were never meant to fight. They were meant to be used. The first group was pushed onto the sand without armor, without weapons. Naked feet sank into the grit. The sunlight blinded them after the long darkness. The roar of the crowd crashed down, not cheers but laughter, a cruel delight at their confusion. Across the arena, gates lifted, and beasts burst forth, lions starved for days, bears driven mad by heat and fear. This was not combat. It was theater. The prisoners ran. Some screamed prayers to gods who no longer listened. Others froze, unable to move, minds shattered by terror. The animals did what animals do. The sand darkened. The crowd roared louder. From the shaded edge of the arena, the gladiators watched. They stood ready, oiled and armed, their muscles honed by years of training. To Rome, they were heroes, symbols of courage and strength. But they were also prisoners themselves, owned by Lonistas, fed and housed like valuable tools. They understood the secret better than anyone. The prisoners were not there to win. They were there to soften the crowd, to raise the hunger for blood to its peak. When the beasts were finally dragged away and the sand raked smooth, the audience demanded more. That was when the gladiators entered. To the crowd, this was the real spectacle. Steel flashed. Shields rang. The names of famous fighters were shouted from every tier. Bets changed hands. But the gladiators knew that their own survival depended on giving the crowd exactly what it wanted. Mercy was rare, hesitation dangerous. A dull fight could end a career as surely as a blade to the throat. Sometimes, the prisoners were brought back out, wounded but alive, thrown into mock battles against trained men. A man with a broken arm handed a wooden sword. A starving captive told to face a heavily armored murmillo. The outcome was decided before the first step. These deaths were slower, more intimate. The crowd watched every movement, savoring the imbalance of power. Between bouts, attendants dragged bodies away through hidden doors. Beneath the arena, slaves worked endlessly, hauling corpses into carts, washing blood into drains that flowed toward the Tiber. Bones were sorted. Skulls set aside. Nothing was wasted. Even in death, prisoners served Rome. What the public rarely saw was what happened when the games were over. Not all prisoners died in the arena. Some were selected afterward, chosen by officials or wealthy patrons. A strong body, a defiant gaze, a refusal to beg, these traits could seal a man's fate. Instead of death, he was given a different sentence. He would be trained. Broken. Reforged into a gladiator. The process was brutal. New recruits were locked into barracks where discipline replaced chains. They were beaten for mistakes, starved for disobedience, forced to fight each other with blunt weapons until bones cracked and spirits bent. Their names were taken. Their past erased. Rome did not want men with memories. It wanted symbols. At night, lying on straw beds, they whispered to each other about the arena. About the prisoners who never came back. About the way the crowd's love could vanish in a single moment. About the strange truth that the gladiators, adored and celebrated, were still closer to the condemned men than to the citizens who cheered them. Above all, they whispered about fear. Fear was the real master of the arena. It ruled the prisoners as they stepped onto the sand. It ruled the gladiators as they fought for applause. And it ruled Rome itself, a city that fed on spectacle to keep its people obedient and distracted. By the time the sun set and torches were lit around the Colosseum, the crowd dispersed, satisfied. They went home to eat, to sleep, to tell stories of glorious battles. They did not speak of the prisoners. They did not ask where the bodies went. Rome preferred its secrets buried deep, under layers of sand and stone. But the prisoners remembered. Those who survived carried the arena inside them, a shadow that never faded. And in the silence of the tunnels, as the last blood was washed away, Rome's darkest secret lingered, waiting for the next day of games. The arena never truly slept. Even when the crowds were gone and the torches burned low, the Colosseum breathed with quiet labor. Slaves scrubbed the sand until their hands bled. Carpenters repaired shattered gates. Animal keepers dragged snarling cages back into the depths. Beneath it all, in chambers cut into stone, the prisoners who still lived waited for dawn. For them, night was worse than the games. In the darkness, memories came alive. The screams they had heard echoed again, sharper without the roar of the crowd to drown them out. Men woke gasping, clawing at the air, certain a lion was on them. Others stared silently into nothing, already gone in spirit. Rome had mastered many arts, but breaking the human mind was one of its greatest. Some prisoners were kept alive for days, even weeks, as part of a longer spectacle. They were paraded through the arena in chains, forced to reenact battles Rome had already won. They played the role of defeated kings, barbarian chiefs, enemies crushed by imperial might. The audience loved this kind of humiliation. It turned conquest into entertainment, history into mockery. The prisoners learned quickly that dignity was dangerous. A bowed head might earn a quicker death. Defiance almost always earned something worse. For the gladiators, this period after the games was a strange mirror of freedom. They were fed well, their wounds treated by skilled doctors. They trained daily, sharpening techniques that could keep them alive for another season. Some even earned fame, gifts, lovers. Yet every one of them knew the truth that Rome hid behind ceremony. They were valuable only as long as they could spill blood. Many gladiators had once been prisoners themselves. They recognized the look in the captive's eyes, the mix of terror and disbelief. Sometimes, before a fight, a gladiator would lean close and whisper advice. How to fall so it looked dramatic. How to beg in a way that might move the crowd. How to die quickly if mercy failed. These small kindnesses were acts of quiet rebellion. But kindness had limits. When the horn sounded and the gates opened, survival came first. A gladiator who hesitated could be killed or punished. A gladiator who showed mercy too often could lose the crowd's favor. And without the crowd, there was no protection. Rome demanded violence, and violence was delivered. The darkest secret of all was not what gladiators did to prisoners, but why. The arena was a machine designed to teach lessons. To the citizens, it said, this is what happens to enemies. To the slaves, it said, obedience keeps you alive. To the soldiers, it said, Rome rewards strength. And to the prisoners, it said nothing at all. Their suffering was not meant to be understood, only consumed. There were moments, rare and dangerous, when the system cracked. A prisoner who fought with unexpected skill. A gladiator who refused to finish a wounded man. A crowd that fell silent instead of cheering. In those moments, Rome felt uneasy, as if the illusion threatened to collapse. Officials would intervene quickly. A signal to the guards. A command to release an animal. The balance was restored with blood. Some prisoners survived long enough to be sold to mines or quarries, places even worse than the arena. Others disappeared into private estates, used as labor until their bodies failed. A few, very few, earned freedom after years of fighting as gladiators, their wooden swords held up before cheering crowds. But freedom came with scars that never healed, and memories that followed them like ghosts. Long after the games ended for the day, the Colosseum stood silent against the night sky, its arches glowing in torchlight. To the city, it was a symbol of glory. To those who had known its depths, it was a monument to fear. The prisoners of the arena were meant to be forgotten. Their names were never carved in stone. Their stories were not written in official histories. Yet they shaped Rome as much as any emperor or general. Every cheer, every bet, every moment of pleasure taken from their pain bound the city tighter to its own cruelty. In the end, the arena devoured everyone it touched. Prisoners died screaming. Gladiators aged and fell. Even the crowd grew restless, always demanding more, pushing the boundaries of violence further. Rome fed the hunger it created, until spectacle became necessity. Centuries later, the sand is gone, and the crowds are dust. But the secret remains, whispered through the broken stone. Rome's greatness was built not only on roads and laws, but on human lives offered up as entertainment. And in the silence where the screams once echoed, the prisoners of the arena still wait to be remembered.